Well, welcome to you all. I'm going to have to pretend to see you instead of staring at this computer screen. And I think we all need to pretend to be standing in front of the Alamo, which was the original plan. A few things about the Alamo that I learned last time we were at the Menger Hotel was the origin of the phrase, drawing a line in the sand. Colonel Travis did that. Those prepared to give their lives in freedom's cause, come over to me. Well, every man except one crossed that line, and 189 patriots died at the Alamo, but they held off an army of 4,000 for 12 days. The phrase, remember the Alamo, was probably responsible for the fact that Texas did win its independence later in San Jacinto under Sam Houston. This is a copy of a page from his dictionary where he crossed out the word temporizing. Our 50th anniversary meeting was held at the Menger Hotel in San Antonio. And we're in a bad time too. It was right after President Clinton's message concerning his proposed Health Security Act, or Hillary Care, which in my opinion may have even been worse than Obamacare, that it might have completely obliterated independent practice. Universal access, comprehensive benefits sound really good until you find out what they really mean. And what equality of care means is that you can't spend your own money to obtain better, potentially life-saving care. But what we have going on now is perhaps just unprecedented. It's really shocking that something this bad could happen so fast. And China characterized it as a devil and a demon, that we can't let this demon hide. And certainly we're reacting as though it is something like that. I think we need a little bit of perspective on just what this is. Of course, 1 million people have died worldwide, and maybe 200,000 in the United States, at least attributed to COVID-19. But what is the perspective in world history about this pandemic? Up here we have some comparisons coming down the timeline of history. This one, the big black one, is the Black Plague. The yellow-orange one is smallpox. The green one here is the 1918 influenza pandemic. And then this one here is the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And by the way, Anthony Fauci was in charge of that one. We see what a wonderful job he did. And here is COVID-19 down here. Dr. Held has already pointed out the corruption in the statistics that we're getting. It was cases, and these things are so convoluted as to what is with a death with COVID as opposed to because of COVID, and what is a case, just a very unreliable positive PCR. I think the only reliable measure is all-cause mortality. And this is worldwide cumulative all-cause mortality since January 2020, which is down here. The red things are the COVID cases, and this thin little blue line in here is COVID deaths. And so we're having all this panic about COVID. This is a plot of causes of death from all respiratory diseases in different years. 2020 had an impressive spike early this year, but now it's down here pretty much in line with causes of respiratory diseases since 2015. In Germany, they're worried about the second wave and have all of these new mandates, and people are protesting against it by the millions. You can see the new cases here are spiking, but here are the deaths. We had a huge increase in deaths here, and the deaths are not doing anything at all. They're still there. They're probably never going to go away. I think the similar thing is in the UK. Here's another measure of the spread of transmission of infectious diseases. The Kenza Health Weather Map comes about by collecting data from apps on a cell phone which are connected to your fever thermometer. I'm not sure you really want to put this data into your cell phone, but if you do, you can see a map of where they're increased instances of people with fever. The gray means nothing much is happening. This light color here is very, very low. This is considered a mild potential increase in transmissible diseases. And for all this, we're in panic. The other reason for panic is the idea that COVID-19, you'll get it or you'll give it to your grandmother and it's not treatable. And this is just not true, despite the claims by the Independent Infectious Diseases Society of America, the CDC, the FDA, and the AMA, and all of them. They say there is no home treatment for COVID-19. Our past president, Lee Merritt, formerly Dr. Lee Heeb, has an excellent article in the fall issue of our journal, which should arrive soon in the mail. It's now posted on the website, saying the treatment of viral diseases has the truth been suppressed for decades. That maybe all these viral diseases are treatable by things like hydroxychloroquine. I found some old papers in a now defunct medical journal, the Medical Record, in 1918 and 1920, when they were treating the Spanish flu, which was often very rapidly fatal in young, healthy people. And they were injecting people as young as 4 years of age and also elderly with quinine, and they were getting better. And this has been one of those things that has been long forgotten. Well, does hydroxychloroquine work? There are no randomized controlled trials that show that it does, but there are about only 8% of all the treatment guidelines that are accepted by organizations such as the American College of Cardiology are backed up by evidence as strong as randomized controlled trials. But here are some kind of interesting comparisons. In Brazil, the deaths from COVID-19 were going up, cases are going up. But in one state, Pará, they started using hydroxychloroquine, and guess what happened? Cases went down and deaths went down even faster. If you don't believe statistics from Brazil, how about Switzerland? Switzerland was doing pretty well with this measure of new dead over new cases resolved, about 3 to 5%, until they stopped dispensing hydroxychloroquine as a result of that negative article in Lancet, which was retracted because of fraud. And then this ratio started going up. The Swiss noticed that and promptly started dispensing hydroxychloroquine again. And after the expected lag period, the ratio started going back down again. Very interesting historical control. When the FDA struck hydroxychloroquine, there was a surge of new cases in the United States. Of the confirmed COVID deaths per million people in countries that ban or limit hydroxychloroquine are about 73% higher than in countries that don't, even though these countries supposedly have much better medical care than the ones down here. And this graph in somewhat different format shows the same thing here. No hydroxychloroquine, lots of death. Give hydroxychloroquine, fewer deaths. Jeremy reformatted this and double-checked all the data to put in our pleadings to the court, asking them to force the FDA to release our national stockpile. When President Trump supposedly touted it anyway, he mentioned it, doctors worldwide started using hydroxychloroquine, and outside the United States, COVID daily deaths after a lag period started going down. So it was a game changer in most of the rest of the world, but apparently President Trump has more influence outside the United States than inside the United States. Well, instead of using this long-established therapy, what we're doing is all of these mask and lockdown mandates. In NHS introduced masks right here. Well, look, the deaths had already been going down, down, down. If they don't introduce the mask until here, you can't really take credit for it, although they will try. California introduced a mask mandate while cases were going up. And guess what? They kept going up. There's an excellent compendium of carefully researched information by Dr. Singleton on our website, aapsonline.org/mask-facts. If we look at the record of countries that have introduced lockdowns versus those that didn't, and I think That slide got left out of here, but it's in my article in the last issue of the journal about this most dangerous virus. It shows that countries had lockdowns and countries that didn't had essentially the same course of disease. Whether you locked down or whether you didn't, the disease came and went. Here's Fauci. I'm sorry, his name is misspelled. But with all this emphasis by him and the CDC and the FDA, we are supposed to have all this excellent randomized controlled trials we're talking about COVID-19. However, as soon as we get the vaccine, it must be immediately delivered for immediate injection, and proper studies can be performed later. Well, here's another big advocate of vaccines. Bill Gates, who is very skilled at making lots of money. I think he would be a little less creepy if he didn't say things like, well, our plan to save millions of lives through our vaccination program will reduce the world's population by 10 to 15%. I'm going to save millions of lives and reduce the population by more than 1 billion. He certainly thinks, like many other people, that the world is vastly overpopulated. Things he said about vaccines: we'd need a miracle treatment that was at least 95% effective, but the FDA will probably approve a vaccine if it's only 50% effective. We're going to make billions of doses, get them out to every part of the world, and this very novel idea, you essentially turn your body into its very own vaccine manufacturing unit, which is a very novel idea, untested, and I'm not sure that too many people want to be an early adopter of an idea like that. Some of the early evidence for vaccines: this is the second dose. I think this is a Pfizer vaccine. Anyway, after the second dose, which seems to be necessary, virtually 100% of people who got the medium dose of the vaccine had some kind of systemic side effect, and virtually all of them needed to take some sort of medication to relieve the symptoms. So what is really going on? And I'm trying to figure all this out because so many things are happening so fast and all at once. Are they somehow related and by some means or other? Are we having a bioterrorist attack? There's been a lot of speculation about the source of this virus. Did it come from a laboratory somewhere? And I can't comment on that. Some people think, well, no, it didn't. And certainly with its very low mortality rate, now that we have a little better information about that, it doesn't seem to be a very good biological weapon. But interestingly, some AAPS member pointed out to me, in this science fiction book, The Eyes of Darkness by Dean Koontz, which is published in 1981, there was a reference to an American biowarfare research facility that was looking into a virus that happened to be named Wuhan 400. So I think even back in 1981, people were talking about the possibility of biological warfare. I don't think that Dean Koontz, despite all his right about the paranormal, had this prescience, but anyway, they were thinking about this. What we do have going on here is an armed insurrection. Despite all the denial by the Democrats and the media, we have a very heavily financed, heavily coordinated and organized armed insurrection. What else can you say when you have 100 days of riots in one city, when you may start out with some peaceful protesters, but pretty soon you have pallets of bricks showing up, vans carrying riot gear, bulletproof vests, Molotov cocktails, and all kinds of things like this. There's even a combat medical manual for people who are expecting to have casualties, and then they put on their black uniforms. We certainly have a lot of racial and class conflict going on to an extent that I have certainly never before seen. A lot of identity cults, division, and divide and conquer. Some people have speculated that folks that are not willing to fly the Antifa flag are instead flying the rainbow flag, the LGBTQXX, which is supposed to represent tolerance, which really represents the opposite of that. It's just something that occurred to me that, white light, and we're all against this white supremacy, and whites are supposed to be all very, very bad. White is the presence of all colors. When you break it up into the colors of the rainbow, you're dividing people into various classes. that often go to war with each other, that we have identity cults. And so that maybe people who, they seem to have the same progressive, totalitarian, intolerant mindset, even though they may be flying a different flag. A cultural revolution has been going on for a long time. Maybe it started with the French revolutions with the Jacobins. The term vandalism started with the French Revolution, and we sure see a lot of that. The Bolshevik Revolution, the Maoist Revolution. Remember that the Red Guards in the Maoist Revolution were trying to smash Mao Zedong's four olds. Old customs, old culture, old habits, old ideas. They were burning books, they were smashing artifacts, and we certainly see that happening all over the place now. Everybody is worried about Nazism. That's what they say, that the Nazis are out in the streets. Well, I think there are probably very few Nazis anywhere in the world. There are a few skinheads. They may actually be fascists. There are a few of those. But Goebbels was supposed to be the greatest propagandist in history. But it is said by people who have better knowledge of this history than I am, he was not the best propagandist. He was the best one that was left after he executed all the better ones. The Nazis were fighting the Bolsheviks. They have a lot in common. They're all leftists, but the Germans, the Nazis were nationalistic. The Bolsheviks really want an international regime and a global technocracy in which a global elite has control of everything about our health, everything about our energy economy. Patrick Wood talked about this at our past meeting about the technocracy and what this was the goal of, like, the climate change activists, to get control of the world's energy supply. They were not making progress as fast as they wanted to because people were not as scared as necessary about climate change to be willing to make drastic changes in their lifestyle. And they probably didn't really believe that they personally could have much effect on the weather. But with this virus, I mean, what a find. Everyone is terrified. Everyone is panicked. Everyone is afraid to come out of their house. And they're very guilty about it. And they feel that what they do can really make a difference. And so we're getting great progress toward this goal of destroying American sovereignty and destroying the economy and putting everyone under the control of this global elite. Black Lives Matter may be out in the streets, but they are not going to be in control. The people who are going to be controlling this don't care about Black lives or anybody's life, for that matter. A bit of insight that I had when I was trying to figure out what is going on is from this book. I don't know how it came to my attention. It's by an evangelical theologian who used to be very popular, wrote a lot of books, gave seminars. I never heard of him, but in this book, he answers a question that had been bothering me for a while, and that is why you can't talk to a liberal. Ann Coulter said, you can't talk to a liberal. And I've been trying to prove her wrong for years, but so far she's winning. And as Schaefer points out, the problem is that back before something happened, he dates it to 1890 in Europe and 1935 in the US, and I'm not sure the dates are right, but it used to be when you were talking to people, even if you disagreed with them violently, they understood what you were trying to say because you both were starting with the same presuppositions. And these included the fact that there are absolutes, that if something is A, it is not non-A. This is something Aristotle said. Ayn Rand made a big deal about it. And it depended on the concept of a thesis and antithesis. And Schaefer says that without it, historic Christianity, and I think that really means Western civilization, is meaningless because these German philosophers are probably guilty of everything. Like Hegel said, well, we have a synthesis. Neither the thesis nor the antithesis is right. That we just have to get rid of this idea of the concept of the absolute. And we see this happening even in mathematics these days. People are saying, oh, who's to say that 2 + 2 is equal 4? That's a racist proposition. So we just have to do away with this. And of course, we have to get Aristotle and all of the classics, as well as the Bible, out of our curriculum. Schaefer talks about the line of despair, and he traces it in philosophy, art, music, general culture, and I think medicine, science, and even in mathematics. One of my family members says, well, at least we'll still have Mozart. I said, well, I don't think so. People are attacking Mozart too. Just listen to modern atonal music. So we really have a culture revolution that's been going on for quite a long time that's just accelerated very rapidly. I don't really mean to end with a downer. There are things I want to say about this. This is a basket case. This cat is the equivalent of a 90-year-old human, and he's hooked up to this monitor. I don't know what this all means, except to tell you that for cats, this is not good. And I think a basket case is what the people who are really running the show want to turn independent doctors in, independent businesses of all types. You know, maybe 50% or 60% of all restaurants will never reopen. This cat is a mascot. One of the disadvantages of a Zoom meeting is we can't meet our AAPS mascots, who are Dr. Tamsin Rosenwasser's Newfoundland dogs. This cat was a mascot for a group that calls itself the Catacomb Group. These exist in academic medical centers. In the wasteland of medical academia, there are groups in the catacombs who may look like Marxists and pretend to be Marxists, and certainly don't dare to say anything politically incorrect, but they do get together to talk about world affairs and to try to continue to survive, since they're not willing to participate in all of the politically correct activities. They are poor. They truly are poor. They love their cats, but they cannot afford veterinary care. So they take care of the animals themselves. They know that if they take a cat like this to the vet for a fee, the vet will put it down, but they wanted Dominic to die at home and receive loving care until he drew his last breath, as he did. The person who sent me this is one of a half dozen fans that exist probably in the whole world for my fiction, a book called Neomorts, available only on Amazon Kindle, that talks about medicine has really gone underground. To get private medical care, you had to go to a thing called Saul's Mobile Repair Van, which the vacuum cleaner and appliance repair was a front for medical services. But veterinary patients are even becoming in the same situation here. You have to stay in the parking lot while your pet goes in to see the vet. You don't know who's taking care of it. You don't know what's happening. You take your wife to the emergency room. You're going to sit in the parking lot all night long. You took her in with chest pain. You don't know who's seeing her. You don't know what's happening to her. Even the President of the United States is in that situation of being excluded from care by people that he knows and can trust. So I think it's our job to make sure that we don't become this basket case. One message of hope is, yes, there are doctors out there that don't dare support us, but they are there, and when the time comes, we may be able to take our country back with their help. A message I'd like to leave you with is this one, that we be not afraid. You know that if a good messenger is coming to you, this is the message. Instead of saying, oh, you got to be scared, put on your mask, don't go anywhere, stay in your house, don't hug your grandchildren, all of that, that they're not coming from the good place. And so I think that we need to speak out, realizing there are people who can't speak out, but we still need to get that message across. Here are some references that AAPS has collected a whole bunch of coronavirus articles here. The C19study.com and hcqtrial.com are a really excellent source of all of these studies that are out there that the AMA doesn't want to tell you about. These are good Twitter feeds to follow. A lot of my slides are screenshots from these sources on Twitter. A couple other websites, and then a recent article that I read. It's called Stop the Unraveling, in the September issue of Commentary, about the Cultural Revolution, the revolution that is going on here, and we have to counter that. So I'm going to stop sharing and ask if we maybe hold your questions till later. I maybe have a few more minutes, but we are behind. So I'd like us to go on to the next speaker, and I'd be glad to answer any questions later. Thank you.